Hello, this is the Hovering Light. I'm Mary. I'll give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out to me. Two ways to do this is through email and YouTube. I'm on a lot of different platforms, so it won't be hard to find me. And when in doubt, it would be helpful to share, spread the word of mouth about my podcast. All you have to do is tell your friends. The Hovering Light, that's me. Okay, so on to the topic of choice here. So since it's May among many outlets that is centered in May, mental health awareness is one of them. So what I'm going to do is give my thoughts about the media interpretation of the movie Girl Interrupted on now, which is the first part of it. And on Wednesday, I'm going to finish it up by giving my thoughts on BetterHelp and everything with the issues with that and how they rebrand themselves as of today. All right, with that said, here we go. Okay, so you hear breathing in the background. That's my baby girl, my youngest. She's taking a nap. Okay, so on to the early 2000s. The early 2000s was, one of those times where, especially when we get into Hollywood, where it was really notable for movies to center around the aspects of psychological discourse, or discussing, or delving into it. And so some people have said that Girl Interrupted is like a modern, more telling or a technological age, telling, I guess, in the technological aspects of in the early 2000s of the issues with mental illness from a female perspective. That's what was highly emphasized in the in the branding of the movie, and also in the movie itself. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get a movie analysis about it, and then I'm going to end everything by talking about the actually found the script, and I'm going to give my thoughts on that, and then wrap up with everything and some general facts on the movie. So initially when I saw the movie, I thought it was very weird, strange, and so this is more pronounced, me being at the time, I was like 12 or 13. So, it's one of those things where it's much better to see certain movies like that, assorted movies like that when you are, I would say, older teen, young adult. You get things fall in place more. So there's that. But when you see it again as an adult, it's even stranger than you initially thought, because you understand the concepts, complex concepts of the movie a lot clearer. And so what I mean by this is simply, so with Winona Ryder's character, from what I understand, this movie, it was originally a book, and then all of this, right? So And so Winona Ryder's character, the time period is the 60s. So, when we get into the 60s, especially how it's presented in Hollywood or, movies, television, so forth. It's presented as the Wild Wild West of people figuring out crap and just doing a whole lot of stuff that they shouldn't be doing, in that sense. And so the movie takes you on a journey of the issues with trying to correct mental illness among America, right? In that time, the issues with how much of a social crisis that really is. And see, that's a problem a lot with what's going on with mental awareness or mental awareness month, this catch-all term saying, hey, here is the time to spread awareness to this. Now, that's all said and good, but at the same time, some people aren't on the bandwagon or just shouting out words just to look relevant or, saying something about mental awareness just because of it's trendy. Most of the times it should be open forum for people to actually candidly discuss the issues that can be linked into the social issues that is with mental illness, particularly when we get into the homeless crisis, we get into the drug crisis. The whole idea is most of the time mental illness leads to having addictions. And so in this movie, Winona Ryder is struggling with a lot of these different issues. And one of them, more pronounced than the most, is the problem with promiscuity and, among everything else. And so, with that said, let's delve into that. Now, it's very interesting. The reason why I bring this up is the particular time period, okay? So around the particular time period, we're getting in a center focus about is the 60s, right? So the 60s is supposed to evoke a certain aesthetic about ideas. So what do I mean by that? All right, so we are getting a cusp of the revolutionized thought process, revolutionizing the idea of love and relationship, specifically sex and the aspects of identity. So with a character like Winona Ryder, she is expressing the ideas that the 60s was supposed to eject or evoke. Young women having the outlet to express sexual freedom. So, excuse my belly, saying hello to y'all. So, this movie in itself is supposed to be a self-serving thing where it says, okay, I guess you can, this is my point of view. I really think it was enabling or excusing. There's a reason why she's so promiscuous. And it's interesting enough, back when Jared Leto wasn't, it served a prevalent point in the movie. If you pay attention to it, if you're not, just sucked in by the feminist bent, feminist message that is very prevalent in this movie. So here's the thing, they show Winona Ryder, she, as a time lapse that is implied that she graduated from high school. Now, Jared Leto's character is someone that was very prevalent into her life. Now, he's also very prevalent because he presents the idea of crossing that line between modernity and being very traditional and conservative, but in another aspects of it. Because he says to her, look, I love you. I'm very serious about you. So I think that we should get married. So, but he also presents the perspective that, how I envision our future, our lives together, is not what is traditionally presented as far as now. I think we should, essentially the way he's talking, you would equate this to something like a hipster lifestyle or something, which is a term that's associated with the 2010s and so forth. But that term was going around and going about since the late 50s on to the 60s. So this idea of being a hipster wouldn't be some conflated or some strange concept. It would have been established, but it's just a tier above, I guess, being a beatnik or something like that. And so when Winona Ryder's character was against it because she felt as if he was getting in the way of her liberation or her freedom. So she and herself, her mental neuroses blocked that by being self-loathing by saying, leading him on, but essentially using him. And so he got tired of it, so he left, right? So there's that. And so let's center around Angelina Jolie, Brittany Murphy, and so forth, and these characters here. So they say in the book that, which I can concur with that, Angelina Jolie's character isn't as brutal or brooding as she is presented in the movie. And I think they were doing that as an aggressive, undertones for how, trying to express how bleak and dark and brooding, going back to brooding, how really just it's like you're being sucked in a black hole with somebody who has a mental illness, but at the same time they have like a really manipulative, awful, harsh, bad attitude. And again, it was this whole thing presented, soft walk, soft stick of woke mentality of saying, oh, female empowerment. Look at her asserting her power. Oh, the grandiose of it. When in actuality, that's pretty cruel. You could say is even worse because going back to this movie being associated with One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Okay, well, Nurse Hatchet was, I'm trying to think about the assorted characters in One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Now, at least with Nurse Hatchet, that's sick enough and horrible enough that she was a caregiver. But it's far worse where the patients are internalizing and manipulating, doing these things, right? There's that. And then with Brittany Murphy's role here, she's supposed to be the one to, now this is my point of view of it, she's supposed to be the one that is representing the the border line between being very feminine, delicate, but wanting to be a modern woman at the same time. And so the way that they show and present her is very odd and off-putting. And it could have been done in a better way, but for whatever reason they wanted to do superfluous examples of showcasing her in that way. And to wrap everything up here, and then I'll get into the script and give my thoughts about the script and more facts about the movie. I think that this is a really good example. Alright, so Alice Walker, she is best known, for The Color Purple. Now, I have my issues with that. I thought that movie was the epitome of what you should not do and how wrong it is to push an agenda, and she really did it with The Color Purple. What I mean by this is highlighting and showcasing that there's only certain facets of the negative imagery of the Black African American culture, especially disposition between a man and a woman, and love and relationships, all that stuff. Now, there is a particular short story that Alice Walker wrote, and it's entitled, if I'm not mistaken, Everyday Use or something like that, right? I'm recalling everything from memory. I'm thinking about it here. So essentially, there's three main characters in the story. You have the mom, the matriarchy. Now you have her two daughters. Like, one is heavily rooted in the Southern traditional culture. She's very, very feminine. She's very distilled. She's very, proper. Now, the other daughter, not the case. She's an antithesis of that. She is, a militant, you can say, for the most part. That's what she is. She is that Black Panther, wild, free, fight the power, hey, by any means necessary, angry back female. And these dispositions take a lot of discourse in this story. And at all the same time, they're presenting these ideas about what it means to be a woman, but also at the same time, the Black experience of what it means to be a woman. Now, when we get into the daughter who is Southern comfort, she represents, the fine aspects, the fine highlights of, what it means to be, very the beauty and the grace of being feminine. But at the same time, the way it's presented in a way to where she looks as if she's she doesn't have any sort of autonomy over herself. She's just very much powerless, right? She is just essentially a girl. But on the other hand, the one that is fight the power, this wild, crazy girl, wild, crazy woman, she has all the autonomy, but in the worst way, you can say. There's no middle ground, there's no in between. And the mom, the matriarchy, she is the essential character of what you see this slippery slope with. This is what has been presented a lot of times, and the stereotypes of a matronly African American woman, matronly looking, very grandmothery looking, no shapes or form, just very run down and all of these things. And she's supposed to be holding everything together, but at the same time, she's single, doing it by herself. So these things present very specific images of the idea of what does this translate to us as a whole in modern culture. And see, this relates heavily a lot into the aspects of Girl Interrupted. all the essential themes here are concluding to the aspects. What do these things mean when we get into the social, cultural landscape of American culture? What are they making commentaries about? What does that mean? So this is how I see it. From my conservative lens, from my female lens, and from me being I happen to be black, from the black lens. I think that smoke and mirrors, that's what it essentially is. It's using the most visceral, emotional points to say something without really saying anything to address the real issues about the problems with the downside and the issues that comes with mental illness. And sometimes there are no real solutions to certain issues that happen. Sometimes it takes a lot of understanding and will to get these things done correctly. Sometimes it's not this whole thing. Let's talk about this female experience, okay, and tagline, or just essentially focus on she is a female. It makes sense because she is hurting. It is hard for a woman in this world. That's not always the case. There's a lot of different cases I've seen personally, and that is accounted for historically, that it's far better to establish and have discipline and to be very self-reflective. That is essentially the case in which we should look at all these things. Now, this is not, the whole focal point here, but it's one of the things to really think and consider. So, self-reflection. That's something that is very difficult to achieve, and it's something that's very difficult to have within yourself. Now, again, mental illness is something that is very complicated. It's not a lot of times it's not really straightforward. And sometimes it's this stuff which is unfortunate, being overanalyzed and self-inflicted, mental issues that aren't there. And sometimes simply the problem is with mental illness is that the circumstance is what happens to make somebody that way, or make somebody, in cases, depression, so forth, is because of all the circumstances they've been through, and it makes it no wonder. And sometimes it's a neurological issue. All these things need to be taken care of, and thought about and considered. You don't just look at the knee-jerk reaction of using their emotion, because most of the time people who do that, they don't really have anything to say, and they don't really care. So they use emotion to hide behind, And so that's what I think, and for the most part, from all of that. And I can't stress enough the importance of having family and conservative traditions, because again, a lot of the issues that go on in this world can be resolved if you have a strong family unit. Because this whole thing where, relying on the government to do something for you, or doing this or whatever, that's not always helpful, and there's something that can't always be done. Now, if you have a strong family unit or a strong community, that adage that says taking care of stuff at your own at your own doorstep can really be helped, because there's people pitching in to take care of that stuff. There's one. Now, this whole thing about the sexual revolution and all this kind of stuff, being addressed, and the girl interrupted, I just don't understand that, because there is biologically of nature that cannot be denied between a man and a woman. It just doesn't flow right like that. For a woman, if you're going to be honest, a woman is naturally set up to be, which is beauty and grace in that, to be very attached when it comes to love and relationships. So that's why it's very important, to vet, to court. And then when you're serious and you're established, then of course, the intimate relationship runs its course. Runs its course, but I mean, it goes about. But sometimes run its course, when it comes to love and relationships, and then ultimately the prize and the goal is marriage. But what I mean by this is, love and sex and everything, that's not everything to a marriage. There's more ways to know that you care for one another, because what's behind the sheets, how that's one thing, but what do you have mutual respect for each other? That's another, because if you don't have that, then that's not really grounds for a strong relationship. That's one of those things. That's what I mean by that. And so that's what these things should be understood, when it comes to these agendas being pushed, specifically when we talk about, these aspects of mental illness and the female voice or female power when it comes to entertainment, when these certain subject matters. There's that. And it's also with the aspects of, from my from the black experience here. Now, I see it like this. So, when I was growing up, I was fortunate enough to grow up, as I'll mention again, I was a 90s kid, okay? So I was fortunate to grow up in a time where, for the most part, it just did social, if you want to be really honest, social class is what ruled the school. Your skin color, it didn't mean a bag of beans. But there was a very prevalent thing to understand, racism within the races. Now, what do I mean by this? Which is not being addressed or said, it's said, but it's not said honestly some of the times. So what I mean is, when I was growing up, now this is just from my experience as a black person, okay? I was really, you could say, I don't care about that term to use about myself. I was very nerd culture. I really responded to that. The reason why I really responded to that is because most of the times, when we get into the sci-fi genres, the aspects of what is different was very prevalent, and it didn't matter about this whole underlaid like us against them kind of stuff. It was just looking at things from other points of views, and that was very appealing to me. There's that. And then this whole thing where this whole situation of code switching, or Biden ignorant self saying that, but how even worse it is for someone of your own race to say, I haven't run across that before. Oh, you don't eat this, or you don't do this, or you must not be black, or certain prongs are saying, but it's okay because they're black, so they can't be racist. To say, in passing, it tastes like that because, assuming it'll taste like that because they're white, so they don't know how to, have any color flavor in their food, which is ludicrous. I mean, and because that is in itself is a passive aggressive polarization towards something too. Say that twice. Really me that bad, man. When they want to get, hey, flip the script on these kind of people. You want to see microaggressions? Well, hey, man, look, flip it on his head and say, well, listen to this. You saying these passive aggressive stuff is no different. So, you need to get off your high horse. So, with this said, I'm going to end on this, and then I'm going to wrap up by talking about the script and the facts of the movie and the book. All right. Okay, everyone, so my thoughts on the script and my thoughts on the book versus the book. Now, the script is more pronounced in the aspects of the theatrics, because the disposition through Winona Ryder's character is vastly different than how she is presented in the book. What I mean by that is they emphasize, sort of this aspect of saying, in general, without leaving it up to the interpretation of the viewer or the reader. And what this means is, okay, so we're going to set everything up to put the context together. So, I say Susanna, using references as, drug references, that it was very prevalent in the 60s, for the psychiatrist to point this out, and also to point out the aspects that she did overdose, and saying these things, well, you need, rest. You have to go to this psychiatric care, this facility, because what you did. Now, versus the book, where her character, they go and it goes into specifics of her having a job, her getting from point A to point B, how much of a struggle it is, going back and recalling and having all these memories about her very dear friend Georgina, and everything that happened, how she just went in a slump, and then going into the dispositions about her story, going to in the dispositions about the aspects of being in, not only going to college, going to an Ivy League college, and their interpretations and the pressures and the everything else that's supposed to come, that sometimes is bestowed upon young people, and some of them can't take it that way, take it all that well, and that's what is left up to viewers to process all these things. But in the script, it's just really things are very theatrically force fed to you, to where you get the point, and it also at the same time is heavily hitting on the evoke emotion. Oh, this is setting up a archetype or a structural aspect of, look at this brute of a man, happen to be a white older man, or putting his power onto her. Now, when we get into the book here, he does assert his power, but it kind of seems like he's going to give her free will, but ultimately it's not there. So it's that whole, you can also take that for what it is as an allegory. And what I mean by that is this whole thing where it's very prevalent in the Christian faith, where God God shows and God bestows free will. Now it's up to, you know, the people who the story is centered around to choose that or not. And so it's really something profound when you think about that, because it's alluding back to the aspects of free will and what does that mean when it's taken away. And it's slapped in your face and hit down, because you then realize that there's no free will. She is the psychiatrist in the book tells the taxi driver, take her on to the facility, and she just succumbs to the fate of that. And also the difference in everything is, in the book, is very precise and is very it's very adult and just straightforward in telling, hey, this is the way it is. These are these assorted characters, and these are their lives, and that's how it's presented. And it's very interesting too, because most of the characters are centered around image and the standard of what is expected, how you're supposed to look, specifically body image. Hi, baby. Okay, let me finish right quick, okay? And I'll get you something, okay? Let me see if I have something in my purse. Let's eat this for now, okay? Hey, won't you sit back a little bit, because you're making a little bit too much noise. You want me to help you open this? There you go. All right, getting back to everything. So there's that, and also, it's really something how these ideologies are seeped in. Even like I said, with the slow stick, and then it's kind of like this metaphor. I think it's a really good metaphor. I've heard someone use it before. I'm recalling back to my days when I was doing audiovisual contract work, and he's very prominent in his business, and he was saying this whole thing of whitewater rafting and your attitude towards using it as how you view debt, right, and how you tackle it, right. Now, if you're not careful, before you know it, you just sunk downstream and washed out. And there's something to be said about that. So, when you talk about these certain issues and use creative, artistic means to center around it, it's always good to have a voice to say, okay, look at it for what it is. Don't put some sort of agenda to it. Don't sugarcoat it. Just talk about it for what it is, so it opens up the interpretations here, or the outlet here to candidly address these certain things everyone chooses. Now, I get the entertainment value, okay, yeah, sure, but also there's a lot of respect in creators, authors, or directors, go down the list, producers, what have you, that take the time to craft stories or narratives in a way that enacts the viewer, listener, what have you, or reader to read in between the lines and think more concretely or objectively or abstract or all of those, all above. That's always neat when those things happen. Okay, so there's that. Alright, so what I'm going to do now here is move on and get into the facts of the matter about the movie. So I'm just going to basically run down the AI generated response. You take this with a grain of salt. It's showcased that AI, most of the stuff isn't always accurate all the time, but no, take this with a grain of salt. So I just think this is the best sort of means to get everything out about the movie in one concise piece here. Alright, so it says Girl Interrupted is a 1999 American biological drama film directed by James Mangold, based on Susanna Kayson's that she is the author of the book of the 1993 memoir. So it says the movie follows an 18-year-old Susanna Kayson, played by Winona Ryder, who is institutionalized at Claremore. Who is institutionalized here? Let's see. In Claremore Psychiatric Hospital in '67 after an overdose. Now, this movie was critically acclaimed, so the film grossed $48 million worldwide and received mixed reviews, but Angelina Jolie ultimately won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role as the psychopathic Lisa Rowe, which in her, and I'll rephrase this again, her role in her character in the book was not like that. She wasn't brute and mean and all these. That's another thing where it's, I don't know. It also says a lot of specifics to the moral character of the whatever who decided to do this too when it comes to these subject matters. I don't know. I just think it's best to just get in there and just tell the story for what it is. I get this whole thing where I say, well, for time constraint, let's take the narrative this way to adapt it in that way, but I don't know. Okay, so it says cast and characters. So the ensemble cast includes the late Brittany Murphy as Daisy Randall, OCD, self-harm. And then her character was more flush, very highly developed, and very. There was the book is very rich, and I'll link it to you. And it's just a lot of these characters is the way it was written. It was very eloquently done. All right, so I'll do my best to try and pronounce this woman's name. She was she was the 90s person here. As far as she was in the faculty and a whole bunch of stuff. So Clea Duvall as Georgina Tuscan, pathological liar, Elizabeth Moss, Polly Clark, schizophrenia, and then Whoopi Goldberg. You can't. It's unfortunate the way that she is as far as her political views and her doing all these crazy things and crazy issues she's had as far as political issues. But you can't take away the aspect that she is a profound. She was. I don't know if she's still acting, but a profound actress. Or that. All right. So as Nurse Valerie Owens. Production details. One of the writers spent several years acquiring the film rights. So the title was inspired by Joanne Vermeer's painting of a girl interpreted at her music. And much of her film was shot in an empty wing in the real-life Hansburg State Hospital. Now, the narrative explores mental health diagnoses in the social context of the 60s as the complex dynamics between patients and the psychiatric system. And also, I think the way that they went into the film version of this movie is to say, hey, look, now this is kind of, a generic interpretation. You all feel free to, continue out the conversation by either emailing me or, making comments on YouTube. It's that simple, and I would greatly appreciate it. By saying, hey, look, we're going to do a all-female new interpretation of One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but we're going to push it more, So anyway, I don't know. It's just, like I said, to end comments, to end closing our comments here. It's always good to try, when we're talking about issues like this, that are mental health issues, try to just state it for what it is. And then, I don't know. It's one of those things. But, for it, it's really, to say on a good note, was interesting, and it is interesting, especially at the time when we get into the early 2000s, to try and take a leap to, cover issues like this, and try to make it like that's really, a big feat to bring this to the forefront and to where it was more mainstreamed, instead of, starting out. It reached so much acclaim, as much as it did. That's really a strong feat, or not, defeat is a strong strive to have, and that's pretty good. That's pretty interesting. All right, so with that said, this reaches the end of the Hard Written Life. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye bye for now.